Check 1, 2.
Curious about real estate?
Yes!
Then you've come to the right place. Get the knowledge you need, get over the fear, and get started. This is the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show with your host, Michael Quarles.
Hello, everybody. Michael Quarles with podcast number 14. Today's podcast is a little bit different. I actually had a conversation with one of my coaching students, and he had found a deal where it consisted of 10 properties in Southern California, one of the hardest markets there is in the United States to buy property in. He found a seller who had 10 properties. 2 of them were free and clear. The balance of them only had about 30% loan to value, so they had 70% equity. The seller wanted to do a seller finance transaction. So here we go. We have a coaching student. I think he's in his second week with me. He sent out a bandit postcard. So it's a postcard that looks like a bandit sign using yellowletters.com. The seller called him, has 10 properties, 2 free and clear, 8 with 70% equity in them, wants to do seller financing, and he had a few questions. So we role-played a couple scenarios on how you talk to a seller to find out where the seller's motivation lies, what the terms are, because there's 5 terms with seller financing. There's the price, there's the down payment, there's the interest payment, there's the length of the loan, and there's the number of payments. So we talk about and role play how to find that out, and then we role play on whether or not we can adjust the seller's value or his price that he wants to sell it to us at, and the tough questions when negotiating with the seller. So here we go.
I want to bounce something off you, so I want to see if I'm off the mark a lot or not, since you'll know and you'll say, yeah, you've probably been reading a lot of stuff, but you don't know what you're talking about. And I think that's what I'm looking for.
Okay.
So if I were to structure this thing on my own, being completely ignorant of what's going on, I would look at each individual deal. Basically, there's 2 that are free and clear, and all the rest of them have a small amount of money that, where he still owes money on each property. What I would look to do is
we don't know that yet, do we?
Yes, yeah. Well, and I have all that paperwork, and there is. He owes a small amount of money on all of the other properties with the exception of 2. 2 of them are free and clear. And from what we were told by title, it is not cross-collateralized.
Okay, so it's not okay, perfect.
His situation, so let me give you some background so you understand where my mind was. His situation is he's older, he's tired of dealing with these properties. He's been managing them this whole time. Even though it's given him cash flow, he likes the cash flow, but he doesn't want the work. And 2 times now he's been in default throughout the term of the loans. And right now he's having to look to refinance or do something because he just is tired of dealing with it. He just wants to get rid of the properties. So, but his issue is he thinks the property's worth $1.92. He's stuck on that number, $1.92 million. Now, if we did a fix and flip on every property and we got it at a good price, which honestly it's nowhere near 1.92, it's only worth about 2.5, a little under 2.5, so 2.4. I started looking at it like, well, this is a good opportunity for a buy and hold deal. So with my ignorance, and this is strictly off of reading stuff and hearing stuff, but never doing it myself, I wouldn't even know the process right now. In my ignorance, for the 2 free and clear properties, I would look to, and he absolutely wants to do seller financing. I would basically offer him straight up seller financing on each one of those properties. Still not sure how to write up that paperwork, but I would have just had to figure it out and fake the funk until I got to it. On all the properties that he owns money on, I would, in my ignorance, offer to basically do a sub-2 and wrap the loans that he already presently has, depending on what their interest rates are. And then I would seller finance the back portion of that. So it's basically like 2 separate checks.
No,
as long as there's still a cash flow opportunity.
Hang on. A wrap is not 2 separate. When you use the term wrap, what you're doing, what the definition of a wrap is, I have a primary loan, and I'm going to take my junior seller finance loan. I'm going to hook those together,
Okay.
and I'm going to wrap my loan is going to wrap the underlying loan that's already there, and
okay.
I'm going to receive a single payment. I'm going to make my portion to Bank of America. I'm going to keep the balance.
Right.
From your perspective,
Okay.
that is the worst scenario. From the
So
seller's
that's awful.
from the seller's perspective, it's the best scenario. Because here's why it's the worst one. There's two reasons mainly. If the seller doesn't make the mortgage payment to Bank of America is going to foreclose.
Right, and then I get screwed.
Right. Secondly, if you ever want to get rid of your seller, meaning maybe the relationship's going sideways, maybe whatever it is, and there's times that you need to get rid of your seller because they're just being a pain in the. In order to get rid of your seller on the wrap, you have to pay both loans off. Where a seller junior carryback, you just pay him his portion and he's on his way, and you still have that. You still have that primary. So
what's the difference between a wrap and a sub 2?
A wrap is a subject to.
Okay, and that's what I thought. So is that like a tool that we could use but we don't want to?
Oh, here's how I would, depending on what the numbers say that we have and what each individual piece of property values at, and depending on the interest rate that you could wrap them on or at, you may be, until we know those things, like if we knew the interest rate on the underlying loan and we knew the principal balance that interest rate was calculated at, that payment was calculated at, that would help us determine our pay down,
right?
Whether how we would structure the deal. So let's not talk about this deal. Let's talk about a phantom deal, like an example deal. You have a house. You have a house that has it's worth $220,000. You owe $40,000 to Bank of America. You want to sell it for $200,000. You want to carry back a $160,000 note.
Okay.
Bank of America's at 6%. They're probably going to be there 6 or 7 or 8%, depending on how long he's had the mortgages. So I wouldn't want to do a wrap with the seller because his wrap to me has to be most likely in his mind bigger than the interest rate he's paying to Bank of America. So I would want to do a sub 2 Bank of America. So I'm just paying that directly to Bank of America. I give him a receipt if I want. And then I'm going to do a seller carryback on the 160 at 2%. And I'm going to make him a mortgage payment at that. Now, the Bank of America is a due on sell. The seller finance, unless you write it in that it has a due on sell, it won't have a due on sell. So now you're in a perfect situation where you can either have a long-term note on a resell or a long-term rental on a buy and hold.
Right.
Now, the two properties that are free and clear are perfect. I would just do 2% seller carryback, and he can't get 2% on $1.2 million. Whatever he owes minus what you offer to give him, he's not going to get 2%. So he'd have to be in the stock market to get 2%, and then he's at jeopardy. What it sounds like to me, and when you start talking to me about he's had a couple defaults or been headed that direction, it sounds like to me that he's living off the income. If that's the case, which is why it also sounds like he wants to do the seller carryback because he wants to live off he wants a reverse mortgage basically. So if that's the case, then let's make him happy. Ask him. One of the first questions I would ask him is, how much money would you like in a payment each month? That's not a question of how much do you want to sell them for. What interest rate do you want to charge me? It is absolutely only how much of a payment do you want per month. It's much like they do in a car. When you go down to a car lot and you buy a car, they're Foursquare, what they call it. They go, what can you see yourself making as a payment? They don't talk about price. They just try to work the deal around what you want as a payment. It sounds like where we have to be on this one.
That makes good sense. I didn't even think about that at all.
So we find out, Mr. Seller, what do you want? I want $5,000 a month. So understand you're right. You want me to pay you $5,000, and you want to have me take care of the underlying loan to Bank of America. And he's going to say yes or no. And then you're going to say, so what is the term that you want me to pay you that $5,000? And he's going to say, well, I want it for the rest of my human life, or I want it for 10 years, or I want it for 15 years, or I want it for 5 years. Now what we have to do is now we have to start multiplying, because if we have $5,000 and he wants it for 15 years, and that's 180 payments. 5 times 180,
Right.
5 times 180 is $900,000, right? Is that all he wants, or does he want to have a balloon at the end of 15 years? So these are the questions that we have to ask the seller, because when we look at a seller from a seller financed transaction, there are 5 aspects of the deal. There's the purchase price, the amount down that we're going to carry, the interest rate we're going to get charged,
Okay.
the length of the loan, and the number of payments. All 5 of those factor into what makes a deal or not. Because I could actually absolutely show you how to make this make sense, buying at 100% of value. So now we have a 1.92 piece of property. It's worth 1.92. There's nothing in there if you resold it tomorrow. If the seller carries back at 1.5% interest rate for a 15-year balloon payment, you'll make $300,000-$400,000 on this transaction. But you won't make it today. You'll make it over time. Most likely, most sellers will do a 30-year amortized note with a 60-month call. So basically, you have a balloon payment in 60 months, but your payments are based upon a 30-year amortized note. So how do you orchestrate all this? I think that's if you go online, I have my contract. I'll send it to you as well, so you can have it. You're in California.
I think we already stole it.
Okay, cool.
I think that's the one. We actually started using your contract way before I ever reached out to you, because we've used 2 different contracts.
Right.
And Chet, one of the guys that works here, he listened to one of your podcasts. He's like, "Hey, I'm going to a site," and then he found your contract, and he said that it was the sexiest thing he'd ever seen. We all agreed, and we've been using it ever since.
Okay.
Because it is pretty sexy.
It allows us to do a lot of things, and at the same time, it's a legal agreement. I mean, it's not so one-sided. Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. And inside it are the terms of seller financing. So it's pretty basic there. Really need to look at the prelim. We need to know what he owes, his calculated basis. So, reason I'm getting to calculated basis is if he's had this loan for 20 years and we have a 10-year payoff on the loan, the majority of the payments you're paying him are principal-only payments. It would be nice to know what year he is on his payment, what his true payoff is, and at the end of the day, what interest rate he wants. So let's role play for a second. We're stuck at 1.92, and that's okay. So you're going to be the seller, I'm going to be me. So Chris, what you're telling me is you want 1.92, and 2 of the properties are free and clear, and the rest of the properties have a little bit of an encumbrance on them?
Yes, pretty much all of them are under 100,000 with the exception of 1.
So all of them are under 100 except for 1. And you want to do seller financing on all the properties. Out of curiosity, what amount of money per month were you hoping to receive as far as income on the note that you're taking?
Well, right now, per month, I'm making about $12,000 a month. I'd be willing to take 5.
So you're right now you're collecting about 12, but you'd be willing to take 5. Out of curiosity, why? I mean, tell me about that situation.
Honestly, I'm just tired of managing the properties, and I've been using the money to live off of, but it's just not worth my time. So as long as I make $5,000 a month, I could live off that.
$5,000 a month, you could live off of that? I'm not saying I could, but if I could, we'd have a deal?
Absolutely.
Now let's talk, how long would you like to receive that? You know, most of the time when we go out and we finance a piece of property, as you know, because you have this financed, we get 30-year notes. Is 30 years what you're expecting?
Yeah, I think 30 years makes sense. To me, at least, it would make sense.
So 30 years would make sense to you?
Right, but I'd have to look at it.
You'd have to look at it. Absolutely. Absolutely. So if I could take the balance that, you know, besides what we owe to Bank of the underlying loans to whatever the lender is, subtract that from the 1.92 million, do a note, secure it against the properties equally. What interest rate did you have in mind? You know, in today's marketplace, if you were going to put that money in Bank of America, you're probably going to get 1%, maybe 1.25%. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Well, I was thinking, I think the going rate right now is about 3%.
You were thinking about 3%.
Yes.
One of the things I have found when I start looking at seller financing, which I love doing, I love making deals happen and making them win-wins for everybody, is since I'm meeting you at your value or close to your value on the 1.92, I'm going to need some help someplace else. Can you see yourself doing, say, 1.75%?
Seems reasonable.
Seems reasonable. And you wanted monthly payments, so you didn't want a balloon payment. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so here's what we have. We have a 1.92 sales price. We're going to do sub to the existing loan, so we're going to continue to pay those things off. We're going to pay you $5,000 a month. Now, quite frankly, at 1.75%, with fully amortized over 30 years, that $5,000 may or may be bigger than that. Will that be all right? Or did you want to do a balloon payment?
Absolutely.
So okay, I was going to say, or did you want to do a balloon payment at the end of 30 years?
What would the balloon payment do for me?
Well, what happens is at the $5,000 a month, then every month and month in and month out, you're going to get a check from me for $5,000. That's going to reduce the note, basically the loan from you. That's factored at 1.75% interest, amortized over 30 years. If there's anything left over, maybe that note's not paid off completely, then I would just write you a check for the total difference. The other scenario is we would amortize it over 30 years based upon the 1.75% interest. Which one would be better for you, the amortized, fully amortized, or the amortized with a balloon payment?
I think the balloon payment actually makes better sense.
So again, I'm not saying it can, but if I could, we have a 1.92 purchase price. We're going to subtract whatever we owe to the underlying lender and then orchestrate a note to you. And that's going to be at a $5,000 a month payment, calculating a 1.75% interest rate, balloon payment, all due and payable in 30 years. Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
That's correct. Now, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Now, outside of what I already owe the bank, I wouldn't mind having a little bit of extra cash so I could pay off some of my bills, $10,000, $20,000.
That's one of the, so besides we owe to the underlying lender, you'd like to be able to have some cash. Now, did you need that cash up front, or did you need it available when you need it, or if you needed it? Because one of the nice things about my program is we actually build into the note a clause that says if you need additional funds, all you have to do is come to me, and there are stipulations within it that I can hand over to you that amount of money. So that's always liquid for you. But did you want that in advance or up front when we close the transaction, or just wanted to be able
to get it up front?
Get it up front. So you want it. So let me understand this correctly. You want a 1.92 sales price. Now, is 20,000? That seems high. Is that? Are you going to use all of that, or is less okay?
Yeah. Well, so still, let's leave it 1.92 because that's the numbers I want. But just 20,000 somewhere in there, I'd like to just have it in cash.
Right, 1.92 sales price. You want to take $20,000 at the close of escrow. So what we'll do is we'll take the $20,000, add it to what you owe to your underlying lender, subtract that total from the 1.92. That's going to be our note. That's how much I owe you at the end of the day. We're going to do 1.75% interest, monthly payments, all due and payable at 30 years. So at close of escrow, I'm going to give you $20,000. We're going to take over the notes with the underlying lender. That doesn't mean I'm going to qualify and assume those formally. I'm going to continue to make the mortgage payment, and then I'm going to start paying you $5,000 a month. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
And when were you hoping to have all this done?
Sooner the better, maybe over the next week or two.
Sooner the better, a week or two? I can close on the day of your choice, so that's no problem from my perspective. Now, let's go back to the $20,000 that you need at close of escrow. Did you need all of that, or did you just need some of that?
I'd like to get all of it if possible.
You'd like to get all of it if possible? And if that wasn't possible, what would be the amount that you would agree to?
Well, I have a car payment, and I want to give some money to my son, so $15,000.
15 grand? What's your car payment by chance?
My car payment's $400 a month.
So you wanted to pay your car off, or just make some payments to them? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, I just wanted to pay it off.
Just wanted to pay it off. Were you going to go buy a new car, or were you going to keep this car?
I was going to keep this one, just pay it off, so I have one less bill.
One less bill? So let me understand this correctly. And how much was your payoff to the car?
It's about $10,400.
So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to give your son somewhere around $5,000, pay your car off, and then get $5,000 a month to live on?
Correct.
Let's do this. Let me give you $5,000 for your son. I understand that. I wish my dad did that for me. Instead of $5,000 a month, I'm going to give you $5,400 a month. That way you can take $400, pay towards your car payment, not have to worry about that. Still have the $5,000 left over. And that makes it real easy on both of us. Is that okay with you?
That actually makes sense.
Perfect. Well, here's what I need to do. I need you to, if you could, round up some of your documents that you have, the notes that you have with your underlying lender, if you have any mortgage statements, those grant deeds that you might have. If you don't have that stuff, that's okay. We can re-pull those from the county recorder's office. And let's meet tomorrow at 10 o'clock. I'll see you there at 10 o'clock, okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
So I don't know if that made any sense. And so, because
absolutely, that was awesome. I wish I would have heard that, a long time ago.
Well, so if we break it down, we always want to find out what the seller wants. And I don't know if I told you the story about the homeless person who I bought a house from.
I actually heard it just the other day.
So the homeless person didn't want cash. He wanted a mortgage payment so he could be homeless, because the mortgage payment that he made fed him. I know it's an amazing thing to think about, but it almost seems like that's what this guy wants, kind of. He doesn't want to be homeless, but he wants a mortgage payment to live on. And he wants his life to be easier. So with my homeless seller, he'd have to walk back to the house to collect rent every month. He didn't want to have to do that anymore. He couldn't fix things because he didn't have a car. No one could call him, kind of thing.
Right.
Well, with this seller, it seems like he's just at that age where he wants to be retired from everything, which is good. And so we're going to set up a little mortgage so he can feel comfortable and he can live the rest of his life. Now, but let's just say for a second that the seller comes to you and says, oh, this is perfect, but I do not want to be paid off. He wants a monthly mortgage payment, right? That's his goal.
Right.
Just like my homeless guy he did not want to be paid off. He didn't want to put that money in the bank. Maybe he had a tax lien, maybe he had whatever it is, and if he put it in the bank, they would just take it, or if he had it on cash, he'd get robbed. So he couldn't have the cash, right?
Right.
So what's going to happen if this guy says, I love everything, but you can't pay me off? That's going to make an interesting transaction, because if you put a prepayment penalty, you can always legally pay him off, but he can orchestrate a prepayment penalty in there for you that causes you harm if you do pay him off. So we have to make sure that he understands that. What's your intention? If your intention is, well, Mike, I'm going to keep these 10 pieces of property and I'm going to keep them as rentals, and I love the income of $5,000 a month income, and I'm going to manage them, keep them for the rest of whatever I can. Great. If it's your intention to sell them, and sell them where you release responsibility to anything. So there's two ways to sell this transaction, three ways. So you could sell it where you go, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I have these 10 units. I'm buying them for 1.92 million. I have this great loan, and if you give me $100,000, you can have the transaction. So that's one way to sell them, right?
Right, absolutely.
I'm going to divide them all up. I'm going to sell them individually, and I'm going to do a seller carryback, a wrap around the two junior loans, or the two loans, the primary and the junior, and I'm personally going to do a wrap, and I'm going to sell them, and I'm going to collect a monthly interest payment, passive income, because I'm now turning myself into a lender. Right?
Interesting. Right.
Or I'm going to buy them, and my intention is I'm going to rent them out for 5 years, wait for the market to turn, where now instead of being worth 220 a piece, they're worth 320 a piece. The moment that they're worth an X dollar value, I'm going to sell all of them.
Okay.
From the seller's perspective, the middle one really doesn't affect him. The other two do, because you don't know what your buyer is going to do, once you assign that note, that deal. And the last one, in 5 years, whatever, the market turns high enough for you to sell him, then he's going to be paid off. Maybe he doesn't want to be paid off. The reality of it is you can do all three, and it's perfectly fine to do all three. It's just, do we disclose the opportunity to that person? Now, in my agreement, I tell the seller that I have the right to assign the contract up front. So, even though I don't legally have to get his permission to do so, I'm still saying that he's authorizing me to do it. So I'm taking another step and going to a different level, which means that I can sleep well at night. I'm ethically, morally, and legally covered. And inside of my note, I have in there that I can pay him off at any time. And in fact, in my note, if he wants me to pay him off early, I have an area in there that I can fill out that allows for me to reduce principal balance on early payoff. That's getting a little technical and probably too technical for this transaction, but I availability. I think if you use my agreement, you're going to be fine and fall forward that way.
Right. We're pretty honest with everybody that we work with.
Okay.
Not only is it in the contract, but when we go through the contract, we explain and express to them, our main mission is we are investors. We are looking to make a profit, and we're very clear with the options that we may take.
Right.
So it's not like we don't lie to anybody, and it's never a surprise. Right. And I think a lot of it also is, we really do build a lot of good rapport with our team here. So, it's never a shock or a surprise. In fact, we've had one lady, she was so excited about us taking care of it so quickly that she gave us 2 other properties and then had my wife list a different property for her.
Let's role play for a second. I want you to be the seller stuck on $1.92 million.
Okay.
And your job is not to go off the $1.92 million.
Okay.
Don't want you to move off that number at all, okay?
Okay.
So what were you hoping to sell your house for? The houses for, again?
I'm looking for $1.92 million.
You're looking for $1.92 million. Can you see yourself doing better than that?
No, I think 1.92. I think it's already, you're getting a great deal as it is. I think they're all worth at least $200,000 a piece. So I think 1.92 is the right number.
So you think 1.92 is the right number? Were you, by chance, aware of that house over on Villa Hermosa that sold for 47?
No, but I know my nephew's a broker, and he says that's what they're worth.
So your nephew's a broker, and he says that's what they're worth? Now, when they appraise value, they appraise property to determine value. It's weird, but they actually include inside of their appraisal the cost of sale. And some of the costs that they allow to be included in the value of a property are real estate commissions and closing costs and those kinds of things. So I absolutely can see where a broker may tell you that something is worth more than it is because they're factoring in their commissions and stuff. And I don't need any of that. I don't need a realtor to handle the transaction, so I don't want to pay for that inside of the sales price. So is there an amount less than the 1.92 million that you can justify for yourself?
No, I need 1.92.
You need 1.92.
Yes.
What's going to happen if you don't get 1.92?
Then I'll just hold on to them.
You'll just
I
hold
mean,
on.
they're making really good money every month. It's almost $13,000 a month it's making. I think it's a great deal for you.
So you'll just hold on to them. And you indicated earlier when we spoke last time that it was kind of stressful to have these things, and that's the reason you wanted to get rid of them, is you didn't want to deal with all the headache of having them as rentals and all the stuff. You just wanted to get on with your life, kind of get rid of the ball and chain. Is that what I heard?
That's true.
So can you help me out, Lenny?
But I don't want to take less than what the properties are worth. And as it is, I think it's already a really good deal for you.
You keep using the want word. I want to win the lottery. It's not going to happen. I mean, I guess I can play at it. I could hope I could win. You know, if I can waste my money and, throw money at the lottery and maybe win it, but probably not going to happen. I hear the odds of winning the lottery are like I could get like electrocuted by lightning better than winning the lottery. But I'd want to. I want to be Brad Pitt too, and I know when I look in the mirror I'm not Brad Pitt. So I understand wanting. I understand wanting something really bad, but also understanding wanting doesn't make it real. I am absolutely ready to buy your property from you. I just need some help. Can you help yourself so I can buy the property?
I hear what you're saying.
Because here's the deal. I want to take all your issues away. I'm going to make you the payment every month that you want. I'm going to basically be a tenant. I'm going to become responsible. So if something happens to the property, I'm fixing it. I'm never going to call you about the leaky roof, the broken toilet, the sink that doesn't work, the garbage disposal that's backed up. I'm not going to call you about any of those things. I'm going to take your issues away. You're going to have this security that you've never had before without having all this work. That's what you want, isn't it?
It is.
I just need some help now. I need you to tell me the least amount that you'll take so we can get this deal done, so you can get on with your life, so I can get on with mine and do what I want to do, and you can get on with yours and do what you want to do. So what's the least amount you'll take?
Well, I think I should have my nephew call you, since he's a broker, and maybe between the two of you, you could figure out, because I really just don't want to deal with this.
I appreciate that you don't want to deal with it. I just don't deal with brokers. Do you think I'm reasonable? Have I said anything that made you think I'm unreasonable? That I'm not friendly?
Absolutely not.
And I'm not fair? Because I think you're a reasonable, fair person yourself. And I think two reasonable people can get together and reasonably work out a win-win situation for both parties. I just need some help from you. What can you see yourself doing?
I'm at 1.92.
I understand. That's why we're having this conversation. Did you want to sell your property, or did you just want to pretend like you were selling your property?
Well, I want to sell it, but I don't want to sell it cheap.
I understand, and
I don't give it away.
I can guarantee you one thing. I have never bought a property from someone who's given it to me. Every seller and I've bought a lot of property, every one of them have agreed to the sales price. Every one of them considered my offer fair. Every one of them figured out that my offer to them was an advantage for them. It was a win-win situation for both of us. Every single one of them. So if every other person that I've ever bought a house from can trust me in that I'm fair, I think you could too. I just need you to help me out a little bit more.
And what would you consider helping you out a little bit more?
Well, I don't want to twist your arm, so I can't just throw out numbers, because if I threw out a number, it would kind of be like your 1.92. It would be just like this fantasy number. So it would be like, okay, I'll give you if you sell it to me for $1. Well, that's not reasonable. I just need you to tell me what the least amount of money that you'll take is, and let's work from that number and create a win-win. I'll take over the responsibility. And quite frankly, it's a big responsibility. I don't know how you did it. So what can you see yourself doing?
I'm gonna need some time to think about it.
Oh my goodness, really? After everything we've been through, after I don't know how many conversations we've had about this property, you want to now think about it? I thought we wanted to sell the property. Did you want to sell the property?
Yeah, I want to sell the property.
So what's the least amount that you'll sell the property for?
I'm sorry, I'm sitting here taking a bunch of notes. This is awesome. I'm starting to run out of stuff to say here.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to win every day. And I will
I'm taking a ton of notes. This is awesome.
Never, ever, ever tell you with a price that I'm comfortable paying for it. You're going to always make me the offer. Always.
Right.
And when you start negotiating with someone, I can start out at a pace that's relatively calm. But when I start getting loud and talking faster and now have an authoritative attitude, what does that make someone else feel? Only one of two things. It's going to either make them feel like I'm an idiot or that they better pay attention. Because those are the only two factors. This guy's a friggin' idiot that I'm talking to, or it must be so important he's had to raise his voice. Well,
right.
I can't be a friggin' idiot because I told you before I started getting loud with my tonality that everybody else I've bought a house from said I was fair. Everybody else felt it was a win-win situation. So for you to sit there by yourself and say, I'm an idiot, makes you the idiot.
Right.
Because no one else thought that I ever bought a house from that I was an idiot. Because they sold me their house. They were fair. They were reasonable. So as soon as I can grab your attention now, then I'm going to pull my conversation back down again and have a polite, low-key conversation. Is negotiation tough? Absolutely. It doesn't feel good sometimes. But sometimes sellers and buyers need to be told what to do.
Right.
And I vividly remember I had agency with a seller, and their stupid fence was going to cost them $200 to fix to sell the house to the buyer because it was a stipulation on the inspection report. And they were just freaking out. Like, oh, we can't pay this $200. And I sat them down. I was the school teacher or the principal. And I said, are you flipping crazy? After everything you've gone through, you're not going to fix that fence for $200. You're going to let that buyer walk away, overtaking $200 that doesn't matter to you in your life, and pay for that fence. Well, they paid for the fence. I could have done something different. I could have done what a lot of realtors do. It's okay, I'll go ahead and cover the fence. Well, my job isn't to cover the fence cost. My job is to tell the seller to sell a house. So in a case where I'm doing what I'm doing or what you're doing, your job is to get the best deal that qualifies for your business model. Now, if the 1.92 was 60% of value already, I'd absolutely not have a negotiation conversation, as I'm not going to go.
Right, so we're definitely off.
Yeah, I'm not going to go. I'm not going to make someone go lower just because I can. I can absolutely tell you're in the military because you wouldn't jump off the 1.92, but most people will.
Right.
Not good military like it's a bad thing, but
no, that's all good.
It was like you have been taught to stand your ground. In this case, you have to have that conversation.
I absolutely do need to have that conversation because the nephew broker, that actually came up, and I ended up speaking with him.
Thanks for listening to the Michael Quarles Real Estate Show. Get more info and stay in touch at michaelquarles.com.